We earn more than we can hide. But every bill we put in our pocket stinks. We need to find a way to make it clean to avoid the attention of the tax authorities and police. Everything must look clean, even if everything inside is rotten.
This is a story about how the most famous gangster, Alphonse Gabriel Capone, initiated a money laundering scheme that still works today. In the 1920s, the United States found itself on the brink of one of the most difficult and paradoxical eras in its history, the period of Prohibition. This was an era when the sale and production of alcohol were completely banned, yet it became an object of even greater demand. Millions of Americans had no intention of giving up their drinking habits, and this created a huge opportunity for those who were willing to break the law for profit. It was during this period that Al Capone, a young inventive gangster, began building his empire. Initially, he was involved in alcohol smuggling, controlling its supply from Canada and the Caribbean islands. In the first 3 years of Prohibition, Al Capone seized most of the alcohol factories and breweries in Chicago. Later, he took control of gambling, prostitution, racketeering, and drug sales. Income from bootlegging and other illegal schemes quickly accumulated. Just imagine earning over $100 million annually. In today's terms, that's about $1.5 billion. But you can't legally dispose of it because this money comes from illegal business. Large financial purchases would attract government attention, which could immediately expose your underground activities. And the cash became so abundant that it created a problem of where to store it safely. Therefore, Capone understood that without a complex scheme to legitimize the money, his empire could be destroyed. He decided to act cunningly and began inventing new intricate ways to protect himself from the watchful eyes of the government. This is how the concept of money laundering emerged. But why laundering? This term appeared precisely because of laundromats. Through them, mafiosi first began to legitimize money from bootlegging.
Laundromats are the perfect cover. No one can say exactly how many customers we serve daily. We report income that exceeds the real numbers, and all this cash is clean. Taxes are paid, and no one has reason to suspect us.
But Al Capone didn't stop there and began opening a series of new businesses: restaurants, car washes, beauty salons, and taxi fleets. All these businesses operated legally and brought in real profits, although their main task was actually to be a front for laundering money for mafia activities. Moreover, these companies created a positive image for Al Capone in society. People saw successful enterprises and considered Capone an ordinary businessman who made his fortune through entrepreneurship. One of the most successful examples was a restaurant that Capone owned in downtown Chicago. Everything there was demonstratively transparent, with exquisite dinners and business meetings, although behind the scenes, work was being done to legitimize criminal income. The restaurant became a meeting place for influential people, politicians, bankers, and corrupt police officers. Al Capone paid generously for them to turn a blind eye to his illegal activities and provide protection for illegal operations. Such a strong position couldn't help but arouse envy among competitors. During one evening, a gang of mafiosi near the North Side shut up the company with whom Capone was dining. The restaurant was riddled with machine gun bullets. This was done on the move from a dozen cars passing by the building. Capone's bodyguard pushed him to the floor as soon as he heard the first shots and covered him with his body. After these attacks, Capone ordered his Cadillac to be armored with bulletproof glass, special tires, and a police siren installed. Later, this car was confiscated by the Treasury Department and used by President Franklin Roosevelt. Since then, all American presidents have been using this invention. But Al Capone didn't plan to stop at just small legal businesses. Illegal income continued to increase, and reached tens of millions monthly. So, laundromats, cabs, movie theaters, and restaurants were just the beginning of a much larger scheme. The real estate market was an ideal place for money laundering, and Capone decided to take advantage of this.
Buy land, buy buildings. They can't be stolen, and they only appreciate in value over time.
Chicago in the 1920s was developing rapidly, and many areas were being rebuilt and expanded. Al Capone began buying houses, hotels, and entire blocks with money that came from the sale of alcohol, drugs, and gambling. Then these buildings were sold or rented out, providing him with a constant flow of clean money that looked like legitimate income. One of the most successful investments was large warehouses used to store contraband alcohol. However, these warehouses were constantly encroached upon by competitors who stole the products. Capone decided to take revenge and stop the theft. His gangsters disguised themselves in police uniforms and infiltrated the enemy's lair without resistance. They shot 7 people from another gang at point-blank range. Each received 15 to 20 bullet wounds. This massacre took place on Valentine's Day in 1929. The slaughter was dubbed the most brazen mass murder in the criminal world, after which Al Capone was arrested for the first time. But they couldn't imprison him due to lack of evidence. Capone was released, but from this time on, Agent Elliot Ness began to closely watch him. He made it his mission to expose all the criminal activities of the Chicago mafioso and send Capone to prison. So, Capone understood that from now on, he needed to avoid unnecessary suspicions. He increasingly began to use frontmen who managed various companies to hide direct links with his businesses. Most of these companies existed only on paper or had minimal operational activities, but they reported large profits that were actually income from mafia operations. Money was also invested in various businesses in different cities to avoid concentrating large sums in one place. And it was stored in banks across the country and abroad to further complicate the trail. However, Elliot Ness kept his eyes on Capone and tried with all his might to arrest the mafioso. He understood that Capone was behind almost all illegal alcohol trade. So, Ness decided to act differently. If it was impossible to prove Capone's involvement in bootlegging, he decided to continue searching for and closing all alcohol factories and underground bars in Chicago, and it worked. Al Capone began to feel danger, so he decided to act creatively. To calm the government a bit and divert attention from his illegal business, Al Capone arranged for his imprisonment in a comfortable cell at the Philadelphia Correctional Facility for 9 months. Law enforcement stopped searching for other bars and breweries of the mafiosi, and Agent Ness was satisfied that he had caught Al Capone. But Capone gained the most advantageous position. He excellently managed his mafia gang and alcohol trade while being in a prison cell, and after the confinement, he came out of prison even stronger and continued to engage in his thriving business. But Ness wasn't going to stop. He understood that arresting Capone for bootlegging or murders was too difficult of a task. Capone's gang perfectly cleaned up their traces, and agents had nothing more to grasp. So, Ness decided to attack him where he was the weakest, in financial reports.
We can't catch him for bootlegging, but he lives like a millionaire and pays taxes like an ordinary businessman. This is his weakness.
Capone considered himself invincible because his enterprises paid taxes and businesses looked legal. But his true luxurious lifestyle was impossible to hide. So, Elliot Ness began to carefully study the financial reports of companies owned by Capone. There were discrepancies in the documents. Restaurants reported millions in income, although their real activities could not bring such profits.
This is just incredible. His declarations are full of fictitious figures.
Ness and his team begin to methodically dissect each of Capone's financial reports over 2 years, tracking every transaction daily. They find discrepancies in his income and expenses, allowing them to accuse him of tax evasion. In 1931, the mafioso is arrested and brought to trial. Al Capone bribed and intimidated the jurors, but his plan was uncovered by Ness's people. In literally minutes before the trial, agents replaced all the jurors, and Capone was put in a no-win situation. The trial became a sensation. He was found guilty not for murders, racketeering, or bootlegging, but for tax evasion. Al Capone's appeal was denied. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison. In Alcatraz prison, Capone begins to suffer from syphilis, a disease he had contracted years earlier. Untreated syphilis begins to affect his brain, causing dementia. In 1939, he is released early from prison due to poor health. Al Capone returns home to his estate in Palm Island, Florida, but he's no longer the Scarface who once ruled Chicago's underworld. His condition rapidly deteriorates. His multi-million-dollar fortune was largely confiscated by the state or lost through numerous lawsuits and treatments. Most of his real estate was sold off, and his businesses closed or passed to other owners. And although his fortune disappeared, Capone's legacy left its mark on the history of organized crime. His money laundering schemes became a template for many future criminal organizations. They showed how criminals can use legitimate businesses to cover illegal activities. In 1947, the most famous mafioso in history, Alphonse Gabriel Capone, dies from complications of syphilis, but his method of money laundering still exists today. I just created my channel, but the competition on YouTube is very high. I try to make as interesting and high-quality videos as possible, but it is very difficult. Please subscribe to my channel. It will give me inspiration and motivation to make the best content for you.